Greetings, everybody. How y'all doing out there? Welcome back to the Gullah House Show. It's me, Mansa Folia Jammu, alongside my big cuz, more like my uncle, Baba Kimo. And we're here with a very dynamic show for you guys today. Unfortunately, I'll tell you early on, I'm having technical issues here in Freetown, Sierra Leone, so I may be going in and out, but I want to rapidly hand this show over to my elder, to my chief elder, Vice President, Big Cuz Baba Kimo. I believe he's going to take it away. Y'all get ready for this show. We just had a little brief discussion backstage, and wow, Myra Davis, yes, he's the one. So I'm going to introduce her and bring her in now with no further ado. And I'll stick around if my computer freezes up and I disappear. Don't worry, I'm still here. All right. So we're going to bring Mama Myra in. Yes, Orangeburg native coming live to the show. Greetings.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. Let
Uh,
me good morning, Brother Baba.
Good morning, Sister Mara. How you doing? I'm so glad that you're here and we're able to get it done.
Okay. Let me clear one thing up. I'm not an Orangeburg native. I'm a New York native with roots in Orangeburg County, South Carolina. I'm
right.
a I'm a product of the Great Migration. My generation, and yeah, my generation, we're the first ones born out of the South. But our connection is back to South Carolina. It was a yearly pilgrimage. That's what we did. And it kept us connected to our roots. And I'm thankful for that.
That's that's powerful. That's powerful. And I appreciate the correction. You're absolutely correct. I'm the same way.
Mm,
My
mm.
family left in '72 from Orangeburg. I was born in Pennsylvania in '79. Same trips. So I absolutely agree with that. That's a great way to say it. I'm not a native Orangeburger, but that's where my roots is at.
Right, right.
Well, I was born right here in Orangeburg. Left
Cool.
left Orangeburg when I was 10, went up to Brooklyn, came back and forth like everybody else. But yeah, I got a little bit of both, a little bit of the hip hop culture, a little bit of country boy. But and I love it. But Miss Mara, we're gonna get right into it here. Here's your book. And I was able to read your book. I read it several times, and you autographed it for me and everything, and I appreciate that. But what I like about your book is it's like my own family. Just the names have changed, but it's essentially the same story. So tell us about your book.
Okay. I always say that my father knew I was going to write this book. Um, in in 1976, Roots came out with Alex Haley. It was actually the second highest rated miniseries on ABC to history's date at that time. Today it's number two, and millions of households watched it, and my family was one of them. My father, my siblings, at first they were watching it, but they sort of fell off, and it was just me and my dad watching it till the end. And I was just intrigued. And at the end, when Alex Haley pretty much called his family names, like how Kunta begot Kizzy and Kizzy begot George and George begot Tom and Tom begot Bertha and Bertha begot Cynthia, and then there was Alex. I was like, I want to do that. And my father said, yeah, you could do that. So basically, Ebony magazine, when it used to be this big,
Yeah, I remember that.
remember that,
Yeah,
had had an Ebony Junior, and they had like a Alex Haley issue, and he brought it home, and he was able to fill up the tree. And I was intrigued, and he was like, you'll probably do that, you'll write a book about it. And at 10, I wasn't thinking about writing a book. I knew I liked to write, but later on the interest came. In the 80s, the Davis family started having family reunions, and they were big family reunions. They had a New York delegation, a South Carolina delegation, but for the most part, when it started, the family reunions were in Eutawville. They were at the base, they were home. And the New York delegation would get together. um, have fundraisers, charter a bus, come down, the whole nine. But I think that cohesiveness goes back to the migration part. I have a cousin, Jen Green, who said it best, who said the people that migrated north understood the assignment. They got to New York or Philly, Jersey, all points north, Detroit, got up there, got settled, and sent for somebody else. Or if they didn't send for the person came up and they, had some place to stay. They got their start. But back to the book, I talk about the migration story first because they all had a mission. They all want to, I don't know if their mission was necessarily to, you know, go up there, work, retire, and come back, but that's what it turned into. And a lot of us from the original migration, the products, we find ourselves coming back.
Hmm.
So we found ourselves home. But the migration story was interesting to me because when we all got together, we would have family gatherings at my house or somebody else's house. But the ones in particular at my house or Uncle Boosie's house, or even in Philly where my aunt Rachel lived, we would get together and we would hear them talk, and it was almost like a patois. It was a different language, and the more they talked to each other, the thicker it got. And Baba, you read the book. There was one time my father wrote a note to my teacher talking about I had to be out of school to
Yeah,
go hog butchering,
yeah.
you
Same
know,
thing happened to me.
right.
Yeah.
And so, they never left that culture behind. It was always something they were going to try to instill into us. And I think I got it the most being the youngest and spent the most time with them, you know. So I remember those hog butcherings. I was on the scene. I had to leave school in New York early because my father was coming down early to be on the scene for that. Uncle Bootsy was coming down early to be on the scene for the hog butchering. It was a family thing. Um, it was something that I felt compelled to put in a book because I wanted to put all those memories, but I also wanted to put the the cultural part, how we all you know, we stayed cohesive and they wanted to make sure we stayed that way.
That's what held my interest when I read the book. I mean, like I said, it is exactly almost my story to the point. One particular thing caught my attention right away because yesterday um we had a homegoing service for my aunt, and so we had
Mm.
different people coming in from various places. And you said this in your book, y'all made good time. And that's exactly what was said yesterday. They were driving in from Detroit, from Virginia, from different places. And the first thing my aunt said was, y'all made good time. And I heard that. I've heard that statement my whole life. We would get on
Right.
25, come down south, and my grandmother, Miss May, would be on the front porch looking up the road, you know, and she would say, "Oh, there goes Bubba and them. They made good time." So your book is essentially is just like my family history.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, it was everybody's northern experience, I think, because I even had a high school friend, Lisa Chambers, that was laughing when she read it, or I might have posted a story about it. And she was like, I was talking about having to listen to Bobby Blue Bland and BB
yeah,
King all the way down, and it was an
yeah,
8 track. It wasn't a cassette. Like you couldn't flip it over. You had to hear the whole thing.
yeah.
And she related to that part. So I'm glad
Exactly.
that book did. But the other part about that book, and I want to give mention to this. Um, I had a lot of the history already from the family reunions because of the people that were involved in planning the family reunions in the 80s. I had a good um, starting point. I was able to start in 1829. Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you, Eliza. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. Mary Dahl, thank you, all the people, and I hope I ain't leave anybody out. I know I did, that did the original research because they did it without the aid of computer. They
Yeah,
had to do
yeah.
word of mouth.
Old
They had to
school.
go from family to family. They had to, actually go to the Orangeburg records, which a lot of those records are burned, but
Right.
they knew what they were doing because when I was able to do it digitally, they were right on point.
Yeah.
Now,
Go ahead.
but also I did want to thank, I don't know if you paid attention to the forward where I mentioned the Gilliard family.
Yes. Yes, I did.
Okay, these are the people that enslaved my family, and I found a lot of records on them. And in the middle of writing the book, I was able to meet Fry Gilliard, who was a six-time descendant of the people that enslaved my family.
Wow.
And in that meeting, it was crazy. I think it was meant to happen because um, I kept looking for Black Gilliards that were moved from South Carolina to Alabama. And I did find some, but they were in Birmingham, and I wasn't able to physically find them. I just found a record of some of these people that said they had roots in South Carolina, but however ended up in Alabama. So I just kept looking, and the name Fry Gilliard kept popping up, popping up, popping up. And so when I found out who I was surprised to see he was white because most of the Gilliards I had known growing up were Black, you
Uh-huh.
know.
Uh-huh.
So when I saw he was white, I saw he was a professor in residence at the University of South Alabama. He was a civil rights um, he was an author, he's a journalist, but his biggest thing was he fought and wrote about civil rights. He
Okay.
wrote like so he him and members of his family was like the complete opposite of what you would think a slave owning family would be. So I say that to say, I speak to him to this day. We're in contact, and I consider him a friend as well as his daughters. But I wouldn't be able to complete the book without him because actually he got me in touch with a relative that a close relative that I didn't even know I had, who was able to help me go back to the 1700s to the first people that might have gotten here.
Uh-huh.
And so he actually wrote the foreword to my book. So I just, I didn't want to tell the story without including that part because unfortunately, our story does include that part,
Yes, it does.
you know. And luckily, his family had the foresight to save this information, donate the information, and I was able to get it. A lot of people aren't going to have that, and that's why there's a need for a family research center in the new museum, and I'm glad they have it for that reason, so people could get connected.
I'm glad you mentioned that because Full and myself, what we have been trying to do was identify the different plantations that our family's connected to. And I know yours is I think it is the Rocks, I believe in Eutawville. The
Yeah,
Rocks.
that's where they started, but it was the Rocks, it was Nemersha. On my grandmother's side, it was the Utah plantation, any Sinclair property probably, but yeah, that's important because once you know who enslaved you, you could try to go through their records to get information on your family.
Yeah, yeah. We've done that to an extent because our family is connected to the Woodlands plantation in Bamberg, and
Hmm.
and that's well documented. So we was able to find out a few family members that way. But and I want to talk about this. You have one ancestor, I believe it's one of your ancestors, and I never heard this story before, and it's amazing. It's the lady. Her name was Rose. I
Yeah.
love Rose. Rose was a bad girl. Rose was about
Okay.
she was about that business. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying? Yeah, yeah. And one of our friends actually posted something about her a couple of days ago. But Rose was ready to do her thing. Tell us about Rose.
And did her thing. Yeah, Rebel Rose. Her name could have been Rosa or Rose. It depends on where it's written. And I found this documentation when I was doing research on our family. Rose, she was owned by several people. I don't know if she was, and they were all related. All the people she was owned by were either related by blood or by marriage. So
Hmm.
it's important for me to say that to make the story make sense. So I got the resources. One of the books is called A Hard Fight. Hold up. A Hard Fight for We. And
Hmm.
that has one of the sources for what I'm doing. And the other one is actually the article that your friend posted. And the third article that I read about Rebel Rose. Rebel Rose, I'm not sure how old she was in March of 1865, but whatever age she was, she decided she had enough. She had two grown children at least, but we
Hmm.
just know about the two children, Harry, who they called Hanover Harry, and another child named Pringle. They all must have lived on different plantations at this point. It says that Rose was living on her own, but she was killed somewhere out of Eutawville. Now, this woman, she was able to go from plantation to plantation. During the Civil War, now you know the Emancipation Proclamation started in 1863. That doesn't mean they were free. We all know the story. However, they were freeing themselves and walking around, and some of them stayed to help on, you know. And so they they had this journal that white women kept to keep in touch, and Rose ended up in a lot of them. So March 26th is when it started. March 26th, 1865, in Pineville, which is 23 miles away. They heard the news that the Black Union soldiers were there arming slaves and tearing stuff up. There were Black Union soldiers that showed up at the plantation house that Rose was in. Rose was assisting these women, and so the women write that Rose, sort of tricked the men. The men were demanding alcohol. So she was like, no, 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 don't give them the alcohol. She poured the alcohol in a bucket and put it on her head and walked out like she was trying, like it was water.
Right.
And the women talked about how brave she was and how she answered all of the questions that the Black Union soldier asked her. Okay, so later on they turn on her and they're like, Rose is dead, that's good. She got what she deserved. She was the ringleader of this insurrection. What they said she did was, well, they admired her for fighting off, not fighting off, but talking harshly to the Black Union soldiers. Then they said that she spirited away many of the Black women to keep them out of harm's way of the soldiers. So that makes sense to me, that she was, I guess, running intel, telling them to go different places. And she had access to go to different plantations because the women wrote themselves that she hid them on different plantations.
Hmm.
Okay. Her son, um, Harry, he worked at um, this plantation called Hanover. He was a slave driver. Slave drivers were sort of hated because they were like another overseer, but
Hmm.
they had influence and they knew a lot of things. They were like almost like they were employed, but they were slaves still. The other one, Pringle, I'm not sure his role, but Pringle, they said, was the one who helped his mother go from plantation. Like they knew which families left town, because when you learn about slavery when you're growing up, you just assume there's this one big plantation and
Hmm.
there's slaves. You don't realize the depth of the wealth that many of these plantation owners had, several plantations, and some of them spread over different counties.
Hmm.
She would have known that if she was a house servant, because she's taught to listen. So while she's serving, they're talking around her like she's not human. much less like she's smart. And they're saying, oh, well, the Porsches are leaving their house. They're abandoning their house. They're going to White Plains Plantation, or they're going to Whitehall Plantation. So she knows this. She's telling her sons, she's telling everybody else, we got a new headquarters. We're going to Whitehall because they're not there. So
Uh-huh.
basically, she set up different headquarters. When they said she was answering the questions of the Union, the Black Union soldiers, she was gathering up ammunition, and she got it to the hangout. So unfortunately, there's a lot of things that go with that story. One of them, the war ended like a month later.
Right.
They didn't know that. They
Right.
didn't know that. In the sources that I read, there was a Dr. Ravenel who had property down there.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Ravenel was going around telling them that they'll never be free. He don't care what's going on. I
Uh-huh.
think that was her breaking point.
Yeah.
That's when her sons, she gathered them together, got the girls to different plantations at the same time. These women are writing, all hell is breaking loose. They stealing our stuff. They stealing our food out the smokehouse. They not chopping wood. They won't do nothing. And Rose is to blame. Now,
Yeah.
a week before, they were like, oh, she's our girl. She helped us. Now they ready to string her up.
I
So
love it.
So now, her son, Harry Hanover, karma will get you.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read his part, his demise, I was sad about it. But then looking at it like a story, I'm like, you got what you deserve, bro. You was a slave driver. God only knows what you did to these people. So what happened to him was he ran into some white troops that were disguised as Union troops. So he thought he could trust them. I don't know why he didn't listen for an accent, but that's just me. But they were disguised as Union troops. So he said, yeah, I know where the Confederates are. I'm gonna lead you to it. So he led them to where he thought they was camping out, and it was an ambush, and they hung him.
Yeah.
My thing is, stick to the script. Who told you to talk to these white people? Get. That's number one. Number two, Pringle, I felt bad because Pringle, they wrote in the diary that he was shot, but he crawled like a quarter of a mile before he finally went down. So
Uh,
I'm thinking Pringle, was trying to fight for his life. And, he was the one had the most intel with his mother. They said his mother had set up at least 3 headquarters with the help of him and had a
mhm.
lot of ammunition. They caught her outside a Utah plantation. They killed her and they shot her, they drug her, and they left her out there to die as a message to the other slaves. And it would be a week later that Lee surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse. But you never know at what point, you know, you've had enough, you know.
Exactly. The implications of what she did and her son and everything was mind-boggling to me because it showed that there was in the Orangeburg area, Eutawville area, this area here
Hmm.
that we were resisting, that we did fight back. Because you hear about the Hamburg massacre, you hear about
Hmm.
the Orangeburg massacre, you hear about the riot up in Norway. You don't really hear about these things. The general public anyway doesn't really hear about these things, but it shows that we had a fighting spirit, and I love that.
Yeah,
I love
yeah,
that part of
yeah. And it was crazy when I read the diaries, and it was like, wow, how they would these women that wrote the story, they were so out of touch with it. They
it.
were
Yeah,
so used to their world being one way. They
I guess
couldn't fathom somebody fighting back against it.
they tricked them the way she did. That's what I like about they probably the happy-go-lucky slave, this and that, and they had no idea. I know they didn't have no idea of the type of conversation that was probably going on between her and the other people within her community because she had to be a network setting
Yeah.
things up.
And then even when I read the article, And, I like to look at maps to get an idea of, and I'll look at
Mhm,
old maps because you
mhm.
you have to go by the maps in that time period. Okay, did they have the Santee Canal then? Did they not? Did they, was this an Indian trail where she could have got here and there and everywhere, because a lot of places that are mentioned, like some plantations, one is in St. Stephen's, one is in this place called Bono, which is like 30 miles away. One is in Pineville, which is, 20 something miles away. Then there's the ones in Eutawville. Then there's one she was hiding out in that would be modern day Cross,
Right.
South
Uh,
Carolina. But it's documented. It's well documented. It's just not taught.
exactly, and that's what we want to share with the general audience, And but okay, just to switch up a little bit, the very first thing that really got to me was how you connected to Sierra Leone, Gullah Geechee people. That was the very first thing in your book that caught my eye. Talk to us about that.
Okay, I didn't even realize it. What it was is when I was looking at the slave ledgers, some of the slave ledgers you could tell were not names that were given to slaves. They weren't the Marys, the Nellies, the Mollys. You had names like Tenaba, Dido,
Hmm.
um, names of that. So when I saw those, I marked them. And then when I went to do the research, I was like, oh, this is Mende. This is Tembe. This is this. So Mandingo. If you look in the beginning of the book, I said there's names such as this, and this.
Uh-huh.
So that was just part of my introduction. So later on, one of my cousins, Deb, she informed me that her daughter actually did an ancestry DNA and it was Sierra Leone. And another family member did one 15% Sierra Leone, And I hadn't done one personally. I was telling my cousin LaCrystal that I will get ready to do one. And before I forget, shout out to LaCrystal, Sylvia, and Selena. This book would not have been done without them.
Yeah.
Um, I plan to do a DNA test in the near future just to see. And what it was, the name Tenaba, LaCrystal and I had been going back and forth. What does this name mean? She felt like it was Native American, but part of me knew I don't think so. Now we do
Hmm.
have Native in our family,
Hmm.
but that name, it just kept gnawing at me. And I couldn't find it when the book was completed. I mean, when I was working on the book, when the book was completed, I just kept looking up the name, kept looking up. And so finally, I came across this man in Florida who had an organization called Teneba's House. And it was during the pandemic. And I called and they said, well, it was a real person and it was a secretary of a church who said that he checks his messages every week and I'll give him the message. So I thought, she'll probably never get back to me. He called and I said, I only have one question. Why did you name your organization Tenaba? Because that's my 6 or 7 time great grandmother's name. And it would have been I think a 3 time great aunt's name because in our family we repeated names.
Yeah.
So they heard that name and they named a child that later on, like in the 1800s, who subsequently died. But the name Tenaba, he told me, he said, yeah, that's my village. He said, that's my mother's name. It means Thursday, but it also means sorrow.
Hmm.
And he was saying we're probably related or come from the same village if you have a family member named Tenaba. And he said they would be Muslim and they would have migrated from Mali. And he said you could have some Tenbi in you. You could, he said you could be everything I am, or you could be something else. But the name Tenaba is definitely home. It's from Sierra Leone. It's from Mali. And then I have another family member, and I call her a family member. She's blood related to other people. She goes by Gila. Now she's been in Sierra Leone back and forth, and She travels there at least once a year that I know of, and she has set up ties, and she did the African ancestry DNA, and she also has her citizenship. And she said she's Mende, she's Tembe, and she's the one who told me about the settlement in Sierra Leone, the Davis clan, the Davis/Davies clan. Because as you know, the War of 1812 brought a lot of people from the South that fought for the British back to Africa to be free.
Right,
Because you couldn't
right.
be free. They could free you, but you couldn't stay free there. And that's another thing that's not taught. That's another thing that's not taught. And let me just segue into that. A lot of people get mad when they say, oh, these black people own slaves. These black people own slaves. Now, there's only one slave owner that I know that was very ratchet that owned slaves in Sumter. I can't remember the name offhand, so I won't mention it. But this was a black slave owner that they said was ratchet. Now,
Ellison was it?
Ellison, that's him.
Right.
That's exactly that.
Hmm.
But the rest of them, what people don't know and what's not taught is if you were given manumission, if you were given freedom, you were only freed for 3 months. You had 90 days to get out of town. You
Wow.
couldn't stay where you were. They
Wow.
don't teach you that. So if you had somebody who was free, a lot of times these people would come in, swoop you up, and own you because they could stay because they might have a trade, they might have a business, but everybody else can't stay if they're free. They had to go somewhere else. That's the first
Another
way
way
that
to Another way
migrate.
of breaking up families.
Right,
Yeah, yeah,
right.
man, that's
And
why.
yeah, so and not to forget the the colonization project when they was trying to send us back to Africa or send us to Africa after we've been established here,
Uh-huh.
so that was another reason why. But back to the Sierra Leone part, that's how I knew there was a connection, you know.
That's is so fascinating to me because I will never forget the experience when I found my Sierra Leone cousins. I found three and I've developed relationships with them. Fatia, Macaulay, and one named Eleanor. And man, it was mind blowing. I met Fatia on my mother's birthday, and
Wow.
Macaulay, we just recently connected with him, and he's actually here in America now. He's visiting Michigan, but I never expected to find Native African born cousins. I never expected that.
Hmm.
No, that and to have a relationship with them today, oh man, that
That's
is
crazy.
great. It's great.
Yeah.
I want to continue that. But now I'm gonna go to something else here because you mentioned your cousins, and when y'all went to the grave site, I believe, of your great grandfather, and it was something you wrote about the Simbi spirits and how
Yeah.
you were scared, and the grave monument tipped over. That cracked me up. That cracked me up. You talk about your cousins and that experience, you know.
Man. First of all, shout out to Selena, Sylvia, and Harvey. Years ago, Selena and Harvey found that there was a a grave tombstone. They were looking to find the grave, and it was my great great my great grandfather, their great grandfather. So when I saw it, I was surprised at the size of it because again, in your mind when when you think about these slave plantation graveyards, you might think, oh, they probably put a piece of wood or it would be
Hmm.
weathered or you couldn't see it or maybe some periwinkle. I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expected to see that. So we were like, look, we got to see it. So at the time, Selena, Sylvia, and I, we started doing three ways on the phone. And we got together that Christmas, went to Aunt B's house, all met up with the cousins, Carolyn, Roderick, Chris, the wise. Yeah, all of us. Yeah, you see that naming pattern.
They
So,
caught my eye right away. It did. They caught my. I said, Roger, whoa, wait a minute. I had to back up. and read that part over again. But go ahead.
So we met up there, and it was, it was winter time, so about 4 o'clock it was dark, you know. So we got up there, and we all got in one car, and we rode up there to now it's the Rocks Pond campground, and you could actually see that sign on 95 when you pass Holly Hill, approaching Holly Hill, or on that area, it's Rocks Pond campground.
Oh
So
yeah. I have seen that.
you've
Yeah,
seen that, right?
yeah,
So that's where it is. So that's where the plantation was, and that's where the grave site was. So we get in there, and it's like a real live campground. You got trailers, you got this and that, and they got water. You got people. I don't know if they live there or just come vacation there. I don't know. So anyway, we were there, and we were like, where's the graveyard? It got to be an entrance here somewhere. And we passed it, and I was like, Lord, please don't let that be the entrance, because it was every scary movie you ever wanted to see. That's how that entrance looked. And so when we got there was these three little white girls,
yeah.
on a bike, like two on one bike, one on the other. They were riding around, and Selena was like, listen, you know where a graveyard is? And they was like, follow us. And the crazy part was they had like a lantern, but it wasn't a lantern. It was one of those solar lights you put on your grass, and it was
Uh-huh.
bright, bright,
Okay.
bright. That caught my eye, but I ain't say anything. So when we got there, the little girls, they were like, what y'all going to do? So we talked to them and everything, cute little girls. And they were like, here, take this lantern. So I said, well, what we going to do with it, And they were like, well, when you finish, just leave it there. We'll get it. So then when we told them what they were about, they were like, we want to go too. One of them was like, nah, I don't want to go. I was like, no, you going. Because whatever gets me is going to get you too. So we're all going. So we went back there. We did not see anything. They they were like, it's marshy. Then that's when they started telling us these ghost stories. There's a ghost back there. Somebody took a picture. You could talk to your grandfather by knocking on his grave. I was like, let's just come back when it's daytime, when it's safer. So the next day, Sunday, Selena, Sylvia, and I, we got there. Um, Glad we didn't try to go any further, because the debris and everything we saw, we would have killed ourselves. So during the day, it was scarier to me, because I'm like, look what we missed. So when we got there, we did see it, took pictures and everything. We were like, wow, talk to them a little bit. Well, we're here. So then we were also looking for Bonaparte. And in our mind, before the research, we knew Bonaparte was somebody close to Jacob,
Hmm.
who we found.
Hmm.
So we just didn't know the relation. We just assumed brother at the time. So we looking. So Sylvia, for some reason, is cleaning up the graveyard. That's a story for another day. She could be a historian. She doesn't know it. She told me stories about my grandmother making them clean up the graveyard, but it was their duty. It's something you do. So she's back there, popping sticks or doing whatever, moving branches. Me and Selena, we trying to move tombstones. So we found one on the ground. We wanted to read it because it looked big and it was close enough to Jacob. So we pick it up, and Sylvia starts losing it. She's like, look, don't touch it. You got to leave the dead alone. You don't disturb the dead. What are you doing?
Hmm.
So Selena looked at me and was like, you grab one and I'll grab the other. So we picked it up, and it wasn't who we were looking for. So we looked at it, and we was like, okay, so we're not going to knock it back down. We left it. So at this point, we were going to go to another plantation. Well, it's not a plantation anymore, but there was a plantation called Hayden Hill, but the graveyard is still there. So we were going to go over there because we do have family members buried there. We were just sleuthing. So as soon as we got to Sylvia's car, in the distance, you hear the brick fall, the tombstone fall, and
Wow.
it's loud. And it fell exactly where it was. And Sylvia starts tripping. She's like, y'all better not bring no spirit in my car. Y'all disturb the dead. That's it's telling you to leave it alone. And so remember, that part had a river by it before
Hmm.
the electricity and everything. I don't know if it was the Santee River, but definitely it was there was water back there.
Hmm.
So it would explain the Simbi spirit, which I'll bring up in a minute. So a series of events started happening in Sylvia's car. Her window started going up and down. I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny, and people don't believe it, but this really happened. Like we were prepared that day to go in the cemetery. So we had bags, plastic bags to put on our feet to go in the cemetery. So when we came back, we were sitting, with the car doors open, taking off our little plastic bags, and her window kept going up and down. And
Wow.
so, and she had a luxury car, you got to start the ignition and let the windows up. She didn't even
Uh-huh.
have her key in the ignition at the time. So she's yelling at me. And when she realizes what's going on, she's blaming me and Selena, talking about we brought the spirit in the car, but she yelling at me the most that I brought the spirit in the car. It was funny. But then when I did the research, the ancestors believed in something called the Simbi spirit, and it
Mhm,
stayed by the water and it stayed
mhm,
by the cemetery. And it
mhm,
wasn't something they were normally afraid of. They were afraid of it if it was unexpected. Like if they were looking for it, and they called it different names, I guess, depending on where you were from. The Simbi
mhm,
spirit is something I've heard of, but some people called it the one eye or the conjure horse. And I
mhm,
think when it was called the one eye or the conjure horse, it was something more evil. But honestly, you know, even though people don't believe it, one person has asked, how did you feel? Did you feel like it was a ghost? No, I felt like I knew something was going on that wasn't natural, but I didn't feel like I was in danger.
mhm.
I didn't feel like I was in danger. And then later on that day, the glass kept tripping. It ended up breaking. And then we talked to our cousin Carolyn, Dr. Gilliard today, but talked to Carolyn, and Carolyn was like, I knew something like that was gonna happen. You're gonna have to curse the ghost out the car. So I started cursing at the ghost, but I'm like, it's funny to me because
Yeah,
you know, so we were probably gonna stay an extra day, but Sylvia wasn't having it. She dropped me off. She was like, I'm dropping you and this ghost
get out
at the
my car,
door.
right?
Right, right. So that made the book, but I thought it was interesting because the Ravenel people, and I connect this back to Rebel Rose. The Ravenel people, um, I don't know how else to put it. They were kind of, you know, wicked, like a
Yeah,
lot. They were wicked.
yeah.
So
I got you.
the same one that set it off with Rebel Rose was the same one that said, to keep your slaves on your toes when they're washing clothes, throw rocks at the river, hide and throw rocks at the river, and they'll be scared because they're gonna think it's something from their root. Like they didn't put it like that. I'm paraphrasing, but basically they were instructing the people to throw stones in the river while they're washing clothes, and it'll scare them because they're gonna think it's something that they believe in from home. You
Mhm,
know, so they
mhm.
used to do stuff like that. This particular Ravenel family used to do stuff like that, I guess to keep their not kids, their enslaved people on their toes. And the other thing with that Rebel Rose thing, I mentioned the name Ravenel. He was the one that was saying, in order to get your slaves under control, make a couple of them disappear. Don't say
Whoa,
anything. Don't say
whoa.
anything. Kidnap them. Now you see them, now you don't. They're going to be scared because
Yeah,
they believe in all that stuff.
right, right, right.
So they used our own belief systems
Yes,
against us. You know
yeah.
what I mean?
Mhm.
So back to the graveyard thing, I just wasn't afraid of that. When I wrote it, like I wasn't afraid till Sylvia got scared. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean?
Right.
Because when somebody else is tripping, like how black people do, if you see somebody else running, you're gonna run.
You gonna take off.
Right. So I thought it was funny, 'cause it could have been my nerves. I don't know. But today I think it's funny. Just like when she, knocked the chicken out in my grandmother's backyard. Did you read that story?
I did. I kind of remember it. Yeah, but tell me
Yeah.
about it.
Oh man. This is the last time I'm gonna tell this story because every time I tell it, she gets mad. It was family reunion time, ironically, and our family reunion happens to be coming up this Saturday in Eutawville. Shout out to the committee. So we every year it was a thing, and I wrote about one of those such times in the book, how they would be preparing in the kitchen because it was no
Yeah,
caterers.
yeah,
They cooked their own
yeah,
food, you know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
So Sylvia, anybody who knows my cousin Sylvia, like she probably should have been born in France. She should have been like in the fashion and stuff like that because she's very fashionable. She loves to dress and she looks good doing it. So back then, she was the one, like how you grew up at 10. She was the one that would always come up from New York, I mean, from South Carolina, and spend the summer with us, go school shopping and come back, you know how we did.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
anyway, we're very close to this day. So this particular day, we getting ready for the family reunion. She got on her new Sergio Valentes. We getting ready to go down there. And so my grandmother who raised her was like, go put my chickens up. They in there wrapping up cakes in aluminum foil,
Right.
and we getting ready to transport the stuff down there. And they like, she's like, put my chicken up. So Sylvia looked at her like, I got my new. And she was like, now. So I went on the porch to watch her because everything she did, I just wanted to go. So I'm standing on the porch, Sylvia running around, trying to put the chickens up, and they all of them went up except for one. This one rebel bird was like stutter stepping and breaking her ankles, doing everything. It would not go in the little pen. So finally, she picked up a ear of corn and not and said, "I said get in the pen," and hit it on the head and knocked it out. And then the only thing I remember, I just turned and my grandmother's whole face was in the screen yelling, like, you see what you did to my chicken? And the
Yeah,
chicken finally came out of it, and then
yeah,
walked into the pen, like it had some
yeah.
sense. But it was the funniest thing to me. And I bring it up every so often to her, or, I'll post a chicken and won't say anything because I know she doesn't like it, but it's so funny, but it was part of my childhood. It's one of those things that I just never forgot about being down there.
I have a similar memory like that because my grandmother, we call her Miss May, she kept chickens also. And she had the little baby biddies one summer. And me and my cousin Horace, we messed around and threw a knife at one of her biddies.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah, she had that's the only time I can ever remember my grandmother getting the switch and trying to attempting to. She did chop us. I ain't gonna lie, she did chop us. But
Dang.
that's but I want to encourage everyone to read your book, and then I want to ask you. I know what does the future hold. I mean, are you you're working on something else? Or is there any more fascinating books like this coming out? Because you're a good author. You write good. I enjoyed reading the
Thank
story.
you.
I enjoyed the book. But tell us what you got going on for the future.
Well, right. I'm in the process of ghostwriting a story for my sister actually. I guess I'm not a ghostwriter no more, but I'm writing a story for her. She has a fascinating story. And I'm working on that, and I'm gonna miss a deadline, but we gonna get it together because her story needs to be told. But to the stuff that I want to personally work on for myself, um, I do have, and I didn't get a chance. I'm gonna get you a copy, Baba. 28 plus 1 days people to talk about for Black
Yeah,
History Month. And
right.
my focus on writing that and some that's going to come out after that is just to keep history alive because it's our responsibility to teach our own children. You see what's
Exactly.
going on in Florida.
Yeah, they want to stop us. They want to ban us. They doing everything they can do to keep our stories suppressed. But that's why I like what you do. That's why me and Fode do what we do. That's why Dr. Curry, shout out to Dr. Curry. That's why he
Oh,
does
shout
what
out
he
to
do.
Dr. Curry. Thank you. He's one of the reasons why I'm even here. Shout
Exactly.
out one of
He
my
he
mentors.
hooked us up. He's the one
Right.
that told us about you and everything. So
Thank
that
you.
that those that's what's happening. That's what's going on. I love these things.
Yeah. Oh,
I was going to say, well, we're almost coming to the end of the show, but three things that describe Miss Myra. Three words. Give us,
oh, 3 words.
my friend Tammy does this on her show, and I stole that idea from her. So I
Oh
like to
man,
thank
give
you.
it back because you caught me off guard. I'm grateful,
Uh-huh.
I am peaceful, and I'm healthy.
Fantastic. That's anything else you want to say to us?
Yeah, another reason why this book was able to get as far as it did, the main reason is through the Columbia Writers Alliance and Dr. Geraldine Noble, who I call mom.
Uh-huh.
She she is also someone in her area, South Carolina, in the upcountry, who did her genealogy and writes stories about her family history in the Greenville area. And
Hmm.
so, it's a network of people that's coming back trying to write stories of keeping their family history alive, you know. What's next for me, like I said, I don't know. I don't know about research for this family, Cornbread. I have other people that could pick up the torch that can do so much more with it. I just want to give a blueprint. My mother's side, I started doing some research on that side, but like starting new research it could get a little tedious. So I had to sit back and get in the mind frame to do that because I found information that I wasn't ready for. Like, you know, can you hear me?
No. That my
Oh,
ear was itching. Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. Sorry about that. I'm sensitive to that. I ain't want nothing else to happen. I can
Oh
only
no
do
no
so
no no.
do
That
so
that's that's just me. Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. So anyway, I plan on writing more books to try to reach the youth or to the parents that know it's their responsibility
Hmm.
to teach their children because people are working hard to keep that information out. Like
Hmm.
I'm doing a blog on the Modern Green Book, and I decided that I was going to do it on the Moms of Liberty. This is a group that started in Florida that whose whole intent was to take over school boards and to stop so-called woke ideology. Basically, they don't want the truth of history taught to the children. And a
Hmm.
lot of these, they're joining school boards, they're doing everything everybody else should do. And
Hmm.
now they're a political force just to stop Black history and other things, inclusion, period. But particularly, I'm talking about Black history. So it is our responsibility to tell the stories and teach our children.
Mhm.
We can't put it on anybody else.
No, you're
It's our
exactly.
responsibility.
You're 100% correct. I fully agree with you. That's why I enjoy what I do. I'm so
Yeah,
glad that my mother started me on my journey many years ago, and it just
yeah.
stuck with me. And I see your cuz back on the scene. Cuz, you got something to say?
Yeah, man. Hey, like I'm over here. I'm just blown away by just by the storytelling, the amount of research, and just the whole experience of Mama Myra. You're a true gem. You're a true
Thank
gem.
you.
Thank you for what you do.
Thank
I
you.
did want to say also that just from this review of your book, man, I think it belongs on everybody's bookshelf. Everybody needs to get a copy of this book. So I just want to say, if you're out there, trace this book down. Cornbread My Soul, the Davis Family of Eutawville, South Carolina. You will not be disappointed. If nothing
Thank
has
you.
ever impressed you, just show anybody this show. Take a look at this show because you'll
Mm,
see that this is not mythology. This is not playfulness. This is
mm-mm.
sincere, real people tracing them roots right there in the United States of America. That's even reconnecting back to the continent, just like myself and Baba. You know, so it's a very beautiful time to be alive. Definitely want to shout out Dr. Walter Curry again for
Yes,
facilitating the connection. He's a very beautiful brother, man. He's doing that work, man. You
yes,
know, he's not letting us forget our ancestors or their
at
stories.
all,
And
at all.
with the opening of the International African American Museum, I know they're going to have your book there. We talked, uh, you know, prior to the show. You did talk briefly about Eutawville and Orangeburg being actually real connected to the Low Country historically on maps and everything like that. I want to know if you could go over that again for the listening audience. It's something that we typically touch on because a lot of people don't know what Orangeburg is. They don't know what a Low Country is. They don't understand the terminology from the outside, and it makes
Okay.
it seem like we're just a bunch of different people, and we're actually not.
Well, basically, today the Low Country is just considered Charleston, Beaufort, Hilton Head, Myrtle Beach, Georgetown. But actually, the corridor goes up 95. It goes up. And before there were counties, before there were districts, there were parishes. And parishes, if it sounds familiar, it sounds like a church. And these churches set up in these different places. And there was a Charleston parish, and they had St. James Santee Parish. They had St. James. Um, St. John's Berkeley Parish, they had St. Frederick's Parish, they had all these parishes, which were essentially churches of ease, where these French Huguenots were able to come connect, get started, and this is where they worship, this is where they were. And so the area that comprised of Charleston went all the way in the 1845 map, and anybody could pull it up. It says Charleston in the middle, and it went all the way up to Orangeburg, all
Mm-hmm.
the way up. It was a big portion. Then it was broken down into districts. And then it was broken down into counties. And
Mm-hmm.
the county of Charleston became down here. But before all of that, I mean, you could take a river and it's documented. These people in plant on plantations in Eutawville, and I'm sure many other places, were on a task system, meaning they did what they had to do and they had time allotted for themselves. So a lot of them, they had gardens, they had things that they could sell in Charleston. There was a riverway that they took to Charleston. You know,
Mhm.
these people, they didn't just stay in one area. They were from Orangeburg County, as we know it, all the way to Charleston every day, every weekend. And the cultures combined, it's the same culture. These people that were sold in Charleston and made their way up, they still have roots to the same place. You know what I mean? It's the same people. I don't know why they don't expand the corridor, why they don't understand we're one person. The other thing is I want to bring up in the book, I talked about the slave project where you had the slave narratives. And
Mhm.
I
Oh yeah.
found out later after the book was written that we had a connection to one of the people in the slave narratives, like Jane Holland. She was telling her story in Charleston. And our family, one of the churches we go to in Eutawville is Spring Hill Baptist Church. And there's a big cemetery called the Spring in the back of it, and she's buried there. So they
Mhm.
brought her from Charleston and buried her back home in Eutawville, you
Mhm.
know. So I look at it like, if it's not the same place geographically, but it's the same culture. It's the same
Yeah,
culture. That's like me going to Ethiopia and saying that I have nothing in common with the people of Sudan. You know what I
right.
mean? It's That's how I look at it. We're all the same people.
Absolutely. Even down to the family trees. When we get into
Yeah,
this genealogy, we find family down on James Island. We find family down in
definitely.
Somerville. You know, we find family in Georgetown, especially in those zones that they recognize. But it, like you said, I also believe that the ideal of there being a corridor needs to be re-examined. We're people. We should be examining our lineages and our history and the places that we've lived and our contributions to to the world. as opposed to just hanging on a culture that is really dying out generation after generation. So if the culture dies, does that mean that the people don't exist? No,
Right.
this is why genealogy is so important. Um, so I appreciate what you said on that. I was reading some time ago, myself and Baba, and we was checking out that for the Penn Center, used to be the Penn School in
Mm-hmm.
St. Helena. The first African or Black American director, he was from Eutawville. He was a native of
Mm.
Eutawville. Um,
That's exactly. I can't remember his name, but yeah, he was the first director. I think his
What?
name. I think his name, if I remember correctly, I think it was Boatwright. I'm not 100% sure, but
Okay.
yeah, yeah. He was from the Penn Center, and not only was the director from Orangeburg, but Orangeburg connects to Dr. Turner. He first heard Gullah here.
Okay.
He first heard Gullah here up on South Carolina State College. So
Oh, Dow
for
Turner.
me, yeah,
yeah,
Oh,
Down
okay.
Turner.
Okay.
He first heard the Gullah language right here in Orangeburg, and I think
Hmm.
there should be some kind of maybe a plaque or something commemorating that because it's important. It's important to
It
me.
is.
To full day,
It is.
it's important to us to have that recognition.
oh yeah. Just imagine he was a linguist, one of the first Black professional linguists that first heard this distinct language that you was just grabbing you hearing your parents talk. You
Mm-hmm.
know, right there in Orangeburg, and most people would put Orangeburg out of the corridor, but we talk that language too. And then even in 1989, 1988, when the president of Sierra Leone went over to South Carolina, he went right to
Yeah,
Orangeburg. He went right to South Carolina State
Wow.
University. So it's because you got to start when you trace something back. You got to go back to the origins. They call Doe Turner the father of Gullah studies because he was the first linguist who got interested in proving that this isn't broken language. This is a full scale Creole language.
Right.
This is a population. This is a population, and so it's a very powerful thing. From those days to now, so much more has been discovered, and we just exist as a beautiful people who have these unique and distinct cultural characteristics that we're born into by birthright. We can
Right.
claim it and live by it. So I appreciate you so much for coming on the show. I wish I could have been more engaged, but I know that I realize now that I really didn't have to. I told you this is your show, and you smoked it. You seriously
Thank
smoked it.
you.
It's a
Thank
great
you.
show. Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you. It
enjoyed
had
it.
to work. It had to work because I ain't have any more Tai Chi videos to put up.
I
Oh yeah,
did watch it too. I didn't know you were into martial arts, Tai Chi. I practiced a little Tai Chi myself a long time ago. But yeah, I watched the video you doing your thing,
So,
carrying the ball, carrying the
yeah,
rock.
shout out to my brother Ed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that was cool. Yeah,
Thank you.
but yeah, I appreciate. I truly enjoyed this
Me
hour.
too.
I appreciate you coming on the show. We had to get it in, and I'm so glad we did. I'm
Yeah.
really
Thank you, brother Baba.
Yeah, you're welcome. So
All right.
any last words, Chief?
man. Many roots, one
One
family. That's all
family.
I
One
can say.
That's
family,
what I'm
one
saying. That's how
family.
That's right. That's right. So we'll link up soon. Definitely. If you have
Okay. All
anything
right.
going on,
well, you know how
contact
to
us.
stay in contact with me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. All right.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very, very
Thank you
much.
so much.
All
All
right.
right.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Yes, sir.
All
All
right.
right.
Bye, y'all.
All right.